here's our next project. 2007 Suzuki RMZ 250. Looks like she's in pretty decent shape, but she's locked up tighter than Charlie M. This one's gonna make me a little nervous. Stick with me, we're gonna tear it apart, find out what's going on. Nothing. Not right. Not correct. This could potentially have something to do with it. Yeah. Be ordering a new air filter. Wow, not happening. So I'm going to tell you, I'm one happy rooster. This head is perfect. There's nothing wrong with it. There is an issue with one of the valve spring buckets or tappets. It's definitely seen better days, so we'll replace that, no problem. Might as well go ahead and do some valve seals while we're in here. Everything is nice and free. I like it. Even the cams, while not 100% perfect, they are reusable. You really get down in here and take a look at the cylinder. There are chunks of metal here. I don't know if this thing melted a piston or what. Yeah, she's not turning. Let's get this cylinder off. Sorry about the fan noise. It's a little bit warm in here. Oh yeah, she's stuck on there. Beautiful. Pull the piston off. Now to keep from dropping these circlips, which hold this wrist pin in, down inside the crankcase, we're going to put a rag, so if it does go flying, it does not go down inside of there. Very important. I was almost 100% certain that this thing was going to need a crankshaft. This has barely any play. It's already got a hot rod's crank in it, or at least connecting rod, and the bearings spin nice and free. This is almost best case scenario. Well, super good news. We'll go ahead and order a new cylinder for it. Go ahead and order a new piston kit. Get the parts for the head that we need. And we're going to be on track to getting this bike back together at a lot less cost than I was expecting. I'll get the parts ordered. See you back here shortly. We'll get it put back together. So this is a cylinder works kit. The minimum ring gap per inch of bore is anywhere between 0.10 to 0.20 millimeter. Let's split that down the middle. If we get our bore, we have 3 inches. It's pretty simple. We'll multiply that by our minimum ring gap specification and get our ring gap. You want to take our ring, mark facing up, gently ease this thing into the cylinder, and we will use the piston to square it up and push it close to the bottom. It's a new cylinder, so it certainly shouldn't have any taper issues. And we're going to take our 0.45 millimeter and check that ring gap, and it is too tight. So let's go the next step down. 0.45 was right in the middle. So 0.10 is the absolute minimum gap times 3 inches is going to be 0.30. That's simple math, ladies and gentlemen. This one better fit. And it does, so that's perfect. Make sure that your oil ring spacer is butted up and not overlapped. Obviously you want to follow your piston manufacturer's guidelines on this. In this kit they're requiring that your end gaps be at least 20 millimeters apart. I'm just going to put them on the opposite sides of the piston to be safe. Make sure you look at the ring. There's generally a mark. This one has a T. I'm assuming that stands for top. Sometimes I'll have a triangle. Make sure that faces towards the top of the piston. There we are. Make sure to lube up the parts with your 4-stroke oil of your choice. I like some Rotella 15W40 heavy duty diesel oil. Now the procedure will be the same to put this clip in. Take a rag and cover it. Save yourself the headache. You don't want it. One little note about these clips. They can really be a pain sometimes to get in. And the biggest thing you don't want to do with these is to bend them. If you bend them, you're taking a really good chance that these things may fall out once they heat up a little bit. And the wrist pin will walk out, and then you're right back to square one, maybe worse. So try to be as gentle as you can putting these things in. Make sure that ring is 100% in the groove. Go ahead and put some oil inside your cylinder. Now if you look closely at the cylinder base here, you got a little chamfer on either side. That's to help squeeze those rings in. You can still break them, so we definitely want to be careful. You can use a tool to compress these piston rings to get this in, but I find you don't really need it if you just take your time and just keep track of where your gaps are. We know our gap for our compression ring is at the top. That's going to be where I want to try to get this in, similar to this. Once you have your cylinder seated, go ahead and spin your engine over to make sure that there's no drag. Doesn't matter which direction you turn it. I hope you can see this, but here's an example of how stretched the old chain is. The old chain is the one in the back that's drooping. Also, if you look at the links up here on the top, that link's not straight. You see that? It's binding and it's kinked. That's a problem. So always replace your chain. It's cheap insurance. We'll go ahead now and replace our valve seals, which means we got to pull the valves apart. We'll take a good look at them. I'm going to pull the shim buckets out, tappets, and keep the shims with them, although I'm going to be replacing all the tappets. I'm going to start off with the shims that are in there, and then we'll adjust once we get the cams back in. Now we're just going to tighten this down until that valve spring starts to compress so we can get to the collets, or the keepers. Now you got to keep in mind, sometimes these things stick. And if it doesn't look like that valve stem is protruding, just take a screwdriver and a hammer and just give it a little tap. I don't know if you saw that, how it popped out. And we'll just continue to crank this down and we can get those little keepers. Now you can go ahead and back this valve back off. Back the spring back off. So down inside the bore, there's your valve seal. Use a pick or something to pull that out, put a new one on, and put it back together. And then we're going to do that for the other three. Alright, we took our original shims that were in the original locations, put them back. Lube up your journals, and we're going to go ahead and drop our camshafts back on. Once they're torqued, you're going to rotate your camshafts a little bit. They should spin nice and free. If they don't, like this intake here, very tight, the most likely cause of that is that your shim is not correct and it's actually dragging. In other words, the clearances are too tight. So we're going to go ahead and measure everything out, compare it with the specs that the manufacturer calls for, and re-shim what needs to be shimmed. Checking your valve clearances, make sure your camshafts are set on the proper timing marks. This Kawasaki here, you see you have a timing mark right here which lines up with the head, and then you have one at 90 degrees off from that. Same thing with the exhaust. Timing mark that lines up with the head, and then one that's 90 degrees off. So that's where you want to have your timing when you're checking. This way your valves aren't compressed. Alright, this is our shim setup in this head. Intake range 0.09 to 0.16 millimeter. Anywhere in there you're fine. Exhaust 0.17 to 0.24 millimeter. Anywhere in there you're fine. So this exhaust valve 0.40, way too big. We need to put a thicker shim. 0.33, way too big, falls out of the range. We need to put a thicker shim. On the intake side, we got 0.15, which is technically in range, and we'll probably just go ahead and leave that one alone. This one here is 0, so we'll redo the intake right now and put a little bit smaller of a shim in here, and then remeasure our clearance. The way to do this, you take it and you go ahead and measure the shim with your micrometer, and we want to go 0.5 millimeter smaller. There's also calculators online for this. Alright, we got the proper shim in. 0.15 is where we're at. Cam spins nice and free like it's supposed to. We'll just finish up doing our shim work. It takes some time, trial and error. Pick up a shim kit, this one here, and now you got to remember there's different diameters of these, not just thickness. The actual diameter will be different. Check with your manufacturer to see which one you've got. These are 7.48 millimeter, and they come in all different sizes, 0.5 millimeter apart. tighten these in a cross pattern, starting from the left front, across back here, here, and here. Tighten them in 2 stages. First stage, 18 foot-pounds. Second stage, we're going to go back and tighten it to 36 foot-pounds. We need to make sure that this is at top dead center. That means the piston is all the way at the top of its travel, so we can set the cam timing. And the way we're going to do that, and I'm going to show you the magneto or flywheel while it's off of the bike so you can actually see it. Now if you look real close, there are 2 marks stamped in here. So as we roll this bike forward, it's going to line up with this timing cover, and I'll show you that in a minute. But the mark we want to go on is the second mark. And if you look at the side of it, you can see it's got a longer mark on it, or the other one does not. That's going to be your top dead center timing mark. Now one thing you want to be careful in here is make sure that this chain doesn't bunch up on you. Another tip also, make sure that your Woodruff key, which sits down inside the crankshaft here, did not fall out. That splines with your flywheel. If that falls out, you may not know, and you put this on crooked, or it can go in any direction, and you'll be way out of time. You'll try to figure out why it won't start, and you'll have to take it to me, and I'll fix it for you. So this is your magneto cover, flywheel cover. If you look close, there's a notch here and a notch here. That's going to line up with this notch. That's going to show you that you're at top dead center. So you can put this on without the gasket temporarily. Now I've taken out the center bolt so that I can put my socket in and actually rotate the crankshaft. Another thing I like to do is put a screwdriver down inside the spark plug hole. I can feel the top of the piston. Just be careful, don't scratch anything up. Hold your chain up so it doesn't fall off the bottom cog. And we're going to slowly rotate this forward. And you can watch that screwdriver come all the way up. Just slowly. And when it stops moving, you're pretty much at top dead center. Now we can go down and look in our hole and verify that. You can see it, we're lined up. We want to keep it on that mark, and we're going to set our timing marks up as I showed you earlier. Once you've verified your timing marks on both the crankshaft lined up with the head, put your tensioner in and start putting the motor back together. On the Kawasaki's and Suzuki's, you have to take out the center pin. The Honda and Yamaha have, you put a screwdriver in there and you turn it and it'll actually pull your tensioner back in. Kawasaki, Suzuki do it a little bit different. So you got to pull out the center spring and pin, push down on this rod, push down on this little catch, and then you can push your foot back in. Now that you get your timing done, go ahead and give this thing a couple of full rotations. Make sure everything spins free. And you're going to bring it back up to top dead center. And recheck all your timing marks. All right, I got it all put back together. Let's turn the fuel on, see if this thing will make any noise. Fingers crossed. Well, she runs. It definitely sounds like I have to get into the carburetor a little bit, probably a little bit dirty. Without the choke on, she bogs a little bit, so I'll just have to take care of that, and then this project is done. Thank you guys so much for watching. You got any comments, throw them down in the comments section. Give me a like, give me a subscription. That'll help me out, bring some more content. We got a KX450F that's locked up, coming up pretty soon, so hit that notification bell, let you know when that video comes out. Thanks again for watching. We'll see you next time.